Pulso. Hoy tendremos un espacio muy interesante. En algún momento voy a hacer un switch a inglés, así que quiero antes que nada agradecerles por el apoyo y darles la bienvenida a esta sesión que va a estar muy interesante. Tengo dos recursos extraordinarios a quien he tenido la oportunidad de conocer. So I will introduce you here in our topic for today. From an expert, how should be our contribution to internalize this topic in everything we do, even if the culture is who we are and what we do. So these two great professionals, experts, researchers, authors, you name it, they had a lot of experience. So I will start with Kimberley or Kim Barker. She's the director for I have here the director for the Institute for Culture, Change and Leadership. She offers expertise, training, and resource for leaders, managers, and professionals who are navigating our diverse global community and economy. She have a lot of experience, and she have been in other industries also. She have been teaching organization change and teams, business communication, managing work business communication, organizational behavior and theory, leadership theories and practice, developing management skills, leading innovation and change, negotiation and influence application for business, resilient for organization and effectiveness, strategic office politics, and introduction to business. So she had a lot of experience, and now she's also an author and a speaker. So thanks, Kim, to accept to be with us in this conversation about what is that we name culture and what we need to internalize and have present to impact or continue to impact our business, our organization, but mostly to have a deeper understanding about this that we name culture. Jerry, hi, hola, welcome. Jerry Glover, wow! Jerry Glover is an author. I had the opportunity to meet both in a certification that I presented and had. I think it was in 2018. You know, the pandemic. As I was talking with Kim and Jerry, like we need to calculate again the time, but Jerry Glover has a lot of experience. He's an author. He said he's an author. He's a consultant. He's a trainer. He's a researcher, and he also it's a coach. And he is the co-author of Transcultural Competence: Navigating Cultural Differences in the Global Community. It was published by APA Books in 2015. It's a great book. It's a very way to understand and go with that topic. So I invite you to see that, and it's accessible. You know, it's accessible to buy it. I have Jerry have been coaching leaders in most regions of the world and have developed culture change and leadership projects in over 200 organizations, communities, and nations from 1976 to present. Projects and change initiatives include gold mines, reserve banks, healthcare and human services, tourism and hospitality, education, and the military. Published 70 articles on culture change and leadership, led a decade-long applied research project to study organizational culture in 34 companies in 10 nations in the 1990s. That's it, right, Jerry? That's it. So talk with being talking about the two of them, it's like you have been like taking and learn and taking the most impacting learning in action and in presence, because both have the great delivery and a strong deep insight and knowledge about this topic. So for me, it's a privilege, and thanks both to be here so we can have a conversation about what is this that we name culture, and mostly what we need to have in present and internalize and assess to be very effective in our initiatives, but mostly in our conversation with leaders. And when we talked about organization, what we need to have in our mind or consider to be to invite people to know more about it, but not only talk about change and innovation and other topics that we are now hearing a lot, but what is that we name culture and what it takes and what we need to have. So I'm going to start with the our girl that is Kim. Kim, tell me, describe why you choose to study this area and be your and consider that as part of your purpose and your career, your study.
So, and I really want to encourage folks. I don't know if they can just speak out, but if you have any questions, specific questions, or you want anything expanded on, to use the chat, because I think that, that's just, a great way to communicate. But and Dr. Natasha, we didn't get started on your credentials. That would take us the rest of the hour, right? So
Thanks for that.
so I was born and raised in kind of a rural area in Michigan, and I got married, and I ended up in Hawaii with my husband, who was in the United States Marine Corps, and I was just blown away by the diversity, right? It was like I was just put in a melting pot, and I just loved it. And it just really made me interested in studying more about culture and why we do the things we do and how can we do things better. And I just never stopped after that. So
You have experience in banking, right? So
yeah,
you have been in other
yeah.
industries.
Hmm.
So lately, we'll go there and how we can take advance in how we have been exposed in other industries and organizations, etc. Because sometimes we say, okay, they are different, but
Right,
there's something that is in common. So
right.
Jerry, welcome to Momento de Impulso. How are you? ¿Cómo
Okay.
estás? Okay. Tell me about why you choose this path, and obviously it's have been a lot of years, dedicating your time, your energy, and your mind in this area of study. What is that invite you and be passionate of this?
Well, we have a few things that we say around the group that I hang out with. And the first thing is that either manage culture or it will manage you.
Mhm.
And that's because many people ignore the culture of organizations, and many people think about the culture, but they're not sure how and what it means. So I think it's really important to look at it from the perspective that we have for a long time. And of course, I've worked in the project anywhere from Fiji to San Juan.
Mhm.
And in fact, I used to work with the Condado Plaza and the Caribe Hilton, and also in the Virgin Islands. I did a lot of work, so I've been around the area, but I haven't been back for a while. So that is one of my favorite places in the world. So you're very fortunate if you're residing there. I think it's a great thing. But
Mhm.
anyway, culture is the way we do things around here.
Mhm.
It has everything to do with how people think, act, dress, behave, um, and so forth. So it's a pretty all-encompassing concept, and if you manage to understand it, you manage to understand organizations better,
Right.
regardless of what your role is in an organization, whether it's a manager, human resources, training, marketing, whatever. They're all involved with culture. And so it's very important, I think, to do that, to be able to understand not only what culture is, but the impact it has on organizations and the people
Yeah.
associated with the organizations.
What is the best way or the simple way to describe or to invite someone to learn more about, this topic? If he or she doesn't study anything about it, because as I have been talking with Kim, sometimes we forget that we are in a location in a country that has its own culture, and you have been like traveling a lot around the world. But how is the simple way that we can invite people to learn more about who we are?
Well, you don't have
And
to. Yeah, you don't have to have your doctorate in cultural anthropology like I do.
yes.
But I think it's important to realize that most people who understand culture well don't necessarily have formal training in it. They just
Hmm.
recognize the importance of it and have made an effort to learn about it. The important thing, too, about culture is there's a variety of ways of interpreting it. And unfortunately, some people look at it pretty superficially.
Hmm.
We have to realize that culture is really involves everything in a particular community or society or corporation or whatever. It involves everything there in one way or the other. So understanding the holistic nature of culture and understanding how important it is to realize that people from different cultures have very different values and different behaviors, and to understand that goes a long way toward resolving a lot of issues in terms of organizational conflict, in terms of organizational productivity, in terms of internal external relations,
Yeah.
and so forth. So and not to mention the way that the organization interacts with the environment. Basically, if you understand an organizational culture, you begin to understand why things are done the way they are.
And if I
Yes.
could interject, one thing that we think is so important is to understand yourself when you're looking at culture. So to start with yourself and have an understanding of what your own cultural baggage is, because we all have cultural baggage or predispositions, and to understand that helps us relate better to the people around us.
Yes, and that's a very good point because, as you said, everyone, is different. We
Hmm.
have a different backgrounds, but how we can how we can be a more have more insight when we move to an organization to another, even if you are in the same country, because
Yeah.
but sometimes we forget, as I am seeing in my experience, we forget that we are in a country that has a main culture. It has a culture, a language, and we have the economy, we have the government, and other areas that are making decision, and it impacts the culture of the organization. So uh, what is the best way, or the approach that we should have as professionals, working in ourselves, as you said, what we need to ask, what are the core questions that we need to ask ourselves to invite us to have that insight and reflection, so we can then transfer and guide others in that way.
Well, I think the first thing is, and I said it already, to get to know yourself, right? So ask for feedback, of course, from those you trust, right? What do you see as what are my strengths, right? What are some areas that you see that I could improve upon? And then the second thing we're really focused on is when cultural dilemmas come up, right? Or issues, if you will. How do you reconcile those and solve those? So we really prescribe to Franz Trampenar's 4 R's of culture, which are to first of all recognize there's a situation, right? There's maybe an issue or a dilemma out there. The second thing is to respect. to really show those that you're dealing with that you have respect for them, and respect for yourself, right? That you want to solve this problem in a way that is respectful for all. And then the third thing is to reconcile. What is the dilemma, right? And how can you solve this dilemma in a way that is as much of a win-win as possible? One saying that Jerry always says is, it's not about thinking outside the box. Sometimes it's about creating a whole new box where everyone can thrive. And I think that that can just be critical. And then the last thing is, how can we move forward with this reconciled solution? How can we root it, or have it stick in our culture so that we can have this positive change remain, even as we move on from those situations.
And that's great, because when we had the opportunity to be there, in funds, having that funds, and Jerry having there also, uh, understand that the things that you just say about, you need to identify the dilemma, so you need to recognize them, to work with that. uh, how have been your experience? It is easy for top management and top leaders to identify that, to identify and accept that there are cultural dilemmas. How you said it have been based on your experience, Jerry, and where you have been in different countries, talk about cultural dilemmas. I don't know if they're accept in the first approach that you make, and how is the best, not the best, but the practical approach to make them internalize that we have the dilemmas, and then we need to recognize so we can work with them effectively.
Well, a cultural dilemma is when people, different stakeholders in a situation, have seemingly opposing differences about about the dilemma itself, and about how they might go about resolving it. And it's not uncommon, of course, to see that type of difference of views toward culture and cultural aspects and cultural dilemmas, where it has to do with technology or social issues or whatever. So being able to understand how to resolve those issues goes a long way toward helping organizations and people and societies become more effective at dealing with the day-to-day problems, because most all organizations have cultural dilemmas. They just may not be aware of them. They may treat them as someone else being a jerk, someone else not being appropriate, and someone who thinks very differently from me. And it's okay if you think differently from someone else. It's just you need to respect them, and can find some ways where you can resolve and reconcile the difference you might have with them about a particular issue, or a particular problem or whatever.
Yes, because we can take a lot of time to managing some issues inside the organization, but then we then recognize that it has been mostly part of the cultural dilemmas that we didn't recognize at the first time. So we take a lot of time, investigating and looking for something that is already there. So it's time. So we need to put them on scope. So
May I stop you for a second?
yes, of course.
I'm not familiar with this particular software. But do the other people who are in the audience ever show up on here?
Yes, they can make comments and questions, and I will say something in notes.
So we never necessarily just look at each other all in the same.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And one thing I think that's really important is to realize that dilemmas don't have to be huge, right? They don't have to be huge problems that we're facing. They can be, I'm the type of person, I like to address the issue when it's smaller, rather than, when the elephant is smaller than whether it, is big and takes
the way you
whole
see
room.
it and the way it is.
Yeah, exactly. So, they don't always have to be huge. But a lot of times, if they're not addressed, they do become bigger, right? And bigger and bigger. And so it's important to, sometimes just to write out what are the dilemmas. I know Jerry's been in consulting situations where, they've written out hundreds of dilemmas, and, then you pick the top ones that you want to address and, focus on. But the thing that's important is you really it's important that you know that you are working on what is actually the dilemma, because sometimes if you don't, you're working on a symptom of a problem and you're not really addressing the real problem, and that
Can you give them
can,
an example, Kim, of some
yeah,
problems?
yeah,
Thank
and
you.
that can give you it can give you a win, but not really a whole win. So I'm a big fan of asking five whys when you are, let's say you have a dilemma and it's something that you want to solve. Asking why five times over and over again to make sure that you really are dealing with what is the real problem. And one of we think dealing with and using cases is a really good way to highlight and understand dilemmas and how they can be addressed, right? Because it's nice to talk theory, it's nice to talk practice, but when you are addressing real world situations and say, hey, this is an issue out here, um, how would you solve that? So one case that we use, if you will, in our culture change and leadership class is two gentlemen are walking into a hotel restaurant, and the waiter is, he greets them, he's quite friendly, and one is a consultant and one is the food and beverage director at the hotel. And the food and beverage director talks about how he's having service issues with his employees. They're not providing good customer service, and the consultant says, we just received amazing service from this gentleman who just seated us, right?
Mhm.
And he said, well, that's because it's his first day on the job. So he hadn't
I
been,
remember that one.
yeah, he hadn't been trained, if you
That's
will.
that's a true story, by the way.
Yeah.
I used to work in the Bahamas for 2 years, and when I first went to the Bahamas, I went to a restaurant with a food and beverage director, and that happened to us.
So you have a dilemma there. What do you do? On the one hand, you have surly employees. Do you roll out a quality initiative, or actually, this was a labor union? Do you kind of work through the routes of labor to try to correct this situation? And the situation is not always an or situation. Sometimes it's an and, right? A lot of times it's an and, where you come together, you have these two opposing issues, if you will, and you come together to try to solve them. And
Mhm.
that can be really powerful when you're bringing everybody to the table and you are trying to figure out how can we make this work? How can we make this better?
And I like that because we had a lot of examples and cases when we discussed that. So it invites us to make sure that we are, making those questions that you said. We need to ask ourselves to understand. But we had input. We had a lot of examples in the reality, but we need to understand them. For example, uh, and I want your insight and your reaction in this. But for example, in about service, about
Mhm.
service, we like generalize that some countries are uh, give more better service than others, and we have that as a general approach. But we don't take the space to understand that why it happens, and we just take it as a fact. And I remember to when I study with with you both and with Jerry and Fons, etc. And you said we need again to go back, internalize, understand, and then ask questions because we cannot generalize because it can be the same in different cases, but the root of that it can impact differently. So here in Puerto Rico, for example, when you talk about culture, we are going to identify a culture, a culture strategy for the organization. But for me, it's kind of uncomfortable to not have in perspective our culture. In Puerto Rico, what who we are, what are the behaviors that describe us, what we see outside. So we sometimes work as we are like an organization in another space. So sometimes you said, it can be cultural, it can be something that it responds in our culture, and some people see you like, what are you talking about? And I said, yes, because there's a lot of, as Kim said, there's a lot of things that it can be part of our culture that we need to internalize so we can be more practical and be more effective in our organization's approach.
Yeah.
So what is how can we can be more practical in how we can communicate to strengthen our culture in that organization, including the location, including the external things of the culture of the location, because it's culture in any scenario or any topic that we talk, but how we can combine that and introduce them or complement them so we can have a better understanding.
And I'm not sure if you have this in Puerto Rico. I guess you can tell me if you do. I was reading an article just before we got on today about we are having great turnover in jobs on the mainland. So,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are leaving their jobs. And, a lot of it is people have been frustrated for a while. And due to COVID, they've had kind of a great awakening, if you will, and they want new opportunities. But
Yes.
there was an article on LinkedIn that I was reading, and it said one of the big reasons that people are leaving is because of these four words. Their feedback was never asked for. And employees don't feel a part of the culture, right? They don't feel that they matter. And, gone are the days of senior leadership having to solve all the problems, right? Now it's senior leadership's job to, obviously be at the helm of the ship, but also be collaborative, work with the employees, be open to suggestions. Employees don't want to, they want to make suggestions. It doesn't matter if every suggestion, that they give is taken. They just want to be heard. And I think that this is kind of an awakening here because people are realizing if people don't feel a part of the culture and they don't feel like they're making a difference in the organization, they're going to leave.
Yes.
They're going to happily leave. So
And as you said, it's very important to take the space or take the space or a moment to understand what people or how people describe the culture, because sometimes we just not, as you said, we don't hear, and we just got the insights from no from another way that is not our employees, and they said culture, but we don't know what are they saying. So Jerry, you have been like in a lot of organizations with a lot of different leadership styles and countries. uh, what you can say about the evolution of this area of study?
Well, I'm a
Are
little
we
bit.
are more open? Are we are like
I think
two
you need to.
steps forward?
I don't think there is an ideal management style or a perfect style or whatever. I think that different countries, different companies, and different regions have different cultures. Therefore, their expectations of how to do things and when to do things is not always the same. I can remember and recall lots of places I've worked in the Pacific and even the Caribbean where the employees have told me we don't want to contribute and say anything in the
Mm-hmm.
meeting. We're not. That's when we were trying to do quality teams in places, and they had to relearn the way they saw participation because that's what they had never learned to think that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to realize that wherever you are, you need to understand what is it that motivates and drives employees in that particular location or in that particular segment of the organization. Certainly, different segments can have different values about participation. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the problems with participative management people is they think everybody should be that way. Uh, and it isn't necessarily the way that the
Right.
world works.
That's so
I think
true.
a lot of people do want to be heard, or at least they want to be appreciated,
Mm-hmm.
but that may not be involved participating in the same way as people from New York City might do it, or Miami, or whatever.
Right.
Yes. Thanks for that. Kim, do you want to say something else about this approach?
Yeah.
Are we more open to talk about culture if we compare with previous year, maybe 10, 15 years ago, or now?
So I just really feel that the pandemic it kind of shook everything up, right? It just put everything in a I don't know, a blender, if you will, right? And we're all trying to make sense of it and come out of it, right? We're really excited about coming out of it. And I feel like people are um, much more open, I would say, because of that. But at the end of the day, I think it all boils down to values, and that's what Jerry was saying. Is what do people value? What are my values as opposed to your values? And really coming to a place where all of those values can be appreciated, right, and put to use. I think at the core, that's what it's all about.
And we can say that maybe we have values identified. We have discussions or sessions talking about values in an organization, and maybe we don't see the results we expect, or the evolution, or the steps forward. It
Mhm.
can be because we are not identifying those dilemmas, and we are not working on that also.
Yes. And there can be huge cost ramifications for this, right? There can be workplace conflict. There can be failed change initiatives, right? There can be mergers that are not successful, right? I mean, it makes good business sense to take time and figure this out because it can have a big impact on a company's bottom line.
Jerry, what do you think about that in your experience? Maybe an organization have everything identified, or everything clear, or a clear strategy, but they are not
Well,
having the result expected.
the problem is that the different segments and different populations within an organization may have very different expectations of what the goals and the missions are. And it's very common to see vision and mission statements that are put forward by the executive group that you find that in among the rank and file workers or among different people, they don't have the same values. Or they look at the vision and mission and don't respect it because it doesn't fit what their expectations are. And so it's quite common to have a lot of diversity within organizations.
Mhm.
And I think that's what a lot of people do forget. And between functional areas, for example,
Mhm.
difference between accounting and human resources or
Yeah.
marketing, there are subcultures in themselves
Mhm.
because they have different ideas. And we have a couple of cases related to the difference between accounting and human resources, marketing, so forth departments because there's all sorts of dilemmas that come up when they both sit and look at the problem in the same problem and try to come up with a solution. The accounting department may have one way of looking at it, and the human resources department have another.
In the
Because
case, continue.
no,
Go
because
ahead.
of values. And
Because
of
of,
course, the other thing that's being left out in this discussion is the customer, or
Absolutely.
the participants or the stakeholders or whoever that benefit or don't benefit from the organization. There can be a variety of expectations from the consumers as well.
Hmm.
And so
yes.
understanding those values and knowing how to manage them is very important.
And that's the
And
job. Go ahead.
no, no, no. Go ahead because I want you to
And
complement that.
and that's the job of senior leadership, right? That's senior leadership's job, is how do you take all of this and harness it, so that you can create synergy from all of this diversity, right? That you can create this environment, this culture where people are excited to come to work. They're excited to be accomplishing this mission that you have all worked on together, and move everybody forward, right? Because that's what it's all about.
What tool we have? There's a lot of tools and assessments that we can have, to
Hmm.
manage this topic and support organization to be more in deep working with this. But what do you both think when the leadership is not committed and they expect, the human resource or the people or partner to work on this or make that initiative? What kind of approaches or recommendations you can make
Well,
or you can share?
I think it's really important that people be able to speak truth to power, right? So, if things aren't going well from an HR perspective, they should feel comfortable bringing that forward, to the leader, the organization's leadership. Um, and it's leadership's job to receive that information, right? Receive that feedback in a way that they can come together and solve a dilemma, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there are competing values or things like that. So, that can be a difficult thing for leadership to do, to receive feedback. But again, for me, it's all about dealing with a problem when it's smaller rather than when it's large and all consuming. And so, being able to um, address what those issues are so that everyone can move forward in a positive way, I think is key to it.
Yes. What you both recommend when you know uh, enter this organization and you can see and people react because those values or the meaning or those values are not like fit into the business or the mission and vision or the purpose of the organization.
And I think that's where listening comes in. And I think leaders doing listening tours or going out and listening to the employees, I think, at least in my experience, a lot of leaders don't do enough listening today. So listening and getting input and getting feedback, and then taking that and using it in a way, um, that you can harness it for good, I think can be really important. I can give you so many examples. I can give you an example of a healthcare company. They had to reduce 10% of their staffing budget, right? Their staffing, FTEs, if you will. And they spent $1 million on a big name consulting company where they could have bought their employees lunch, and their frontline employees could have told them how to save 10% of the budget, right? or
Yes.
or their supervisors,
Mhm.
right? Or even their middle managers. But instead, they wanted to get subject matter experts in there to kind of rework everything. And in the end, they were spending more money than less money. So I'm not saying, I think subject there's a place for subject matter experts. There's a place to bring people in from the outside and share their expertise. But there's also a time and a place to listen and to understand what truly is going on. And like Jerry said, it's not just with the employees, it's with the customers, right?
Yes.
It's with everyone, all of the stakeholders, so that the company can harness that and do great things.
There's
And sometimes
there's a case that I remember that we've used for years, and actually it came from Puerto Rico, and we were working at a particular hotel property, and they decided to put in what are called point of sale terminals, which are in the 80s was a new cash register system that was automated and made things much easier. They put that in, and they assumed that everyone there would be very happy with it because it would make life easier. But
Mhm.
after a couple of months, it was getting really bad. The union was upset. The employees were upset. So we went in and started talking to them and found out and said, well, what happens with this system? And said, well, we get the order and we put it in the point of sale terminal. Then it goes back to the kitchen. Then we then had to walk back to the kitchen and tell the cooks what we put in. And they said the problem is the cook couldn't read, and unfortunately they were putting it in English, and they weren't able to read what they were putting in.
Mhm.
So a simple thing like that had been going on for several months, and everyone got very upset because they the company that had come in to put the system in had not thought to talk to the locals,
Yep.
meaning the chefs and the employees and everything, and to find out how the system was working, and to find out
Yes.
what the system should have. And had they done that, they would have known that they're assuming that everyone there was able to understand what the instructions were coming back from the food order, weren't being able to do that. So it was quite a lesson, and the simplest things sometimes become big issues.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true. Uh, Both that have been, in a lot of mergers, acquisitions, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of things or examples happening now, even during and after pandemic, and still we are in
Mhm.
pandemic. We are there. We are not
Mhm.
yet, out. But what is I have been seeing a lot of these examples, but there's I have seen a lot of challenge in which culture is gonna be like
Mm.
on the top, and instead of integration, I
Yes.
have seen like the battle of who will be like
Right.
in the front, right? What are based on your in both experience, what can you say about this?
Well,
It's
expatriate managers have been a source of the kind of issue you're talking about, because expatriate managers often come in and they assume everyone there should think the way they do,
Yep.
and should manage the way they do, and should operate and deal with the different issues the way they do. And in many cases, that's not the case. And I recall a manager in Fiji once that was an expatriate manager, and I went in, and the hotel was absolutely fantastic. The employees were great. Everyone was happy, and the whole thing was working fantastically. And I said to him, said, uh, "Why? What have you done since you came in 6 months ago?" He said, "Absolutely nothing." He said, "Because the people here are very friendly, they're very great, and they know how to take care of people. So I support them, and support the way they do things so that they can serve our customers better." But I've never, very rarely ever heard a manager who went into a
Mhm.
place and particularly an expatriate manager who didn't go into a place and try to change everything around to fit their values.
Okay.
And that can be good in some cases,
Mhm.
and in other cases it may not, because maybe there's a reason why people are smiling or why they're happy or whatever. And the last thing you want to do is to start messing with and changing the culture, if you will,
Mhm.
until you know um, what it's doing.
Yeah.
And
And
as you say it, they miss a lot the previous culture because they don't give the opportunity to understand the new one, or maybe the integrated or the powerful one that
Yeah,
is
and
in
in
them.
terms of change too, change initiatives where you got to change person coming in, a leader or a consultant or whatever, they're trying to put a change project into an organization. They very rarely ever integrate it with the existing culture that was there.
right.
And they just kind of discard the culture that was there and try to put their own system in, often
Yes.
at the expense of the culture that was there. And so it's important to be able to recognize how the new culture that you want to implement in the change project can fit the existing culture which has been there, and to be able to reconcile the differences in how things are done between the two.
And
Yes,
then they
if not, it
wonder,
can be very painful.
and then they
It's not, it can be painful.
and then they wonder
And
why the employees left. Why did all these employees leave? Because
yes,
there wasn't an integration,
Well,
right?
managers leave too, by the way,
Absolutely. That's
because
true. That's true.
yes, yes,
the board of directors or the powers that be back in New York or wherever don't always go along with what the managers think either.
Right.
So
That's very true.
it's very
yes.
few times that I haven't seen a difference in how people think in organizations. And the closer you get to at least having them have a common goal, that's the goal that you want to strive for, the more harmonious it'll be, and the more effective it'll be, and hopefully the more productive it'll be.
And Dr. Natasha, one thing that I see as HR's role going forward, especially as we move towards more automation, is for HR to take um, this opportunity, if you will, to create this environment where all employees can thrive, where all voices can be heard, those that want to, right? And I just think that payroll is going to be done automatically, benefits are going to be done automatically. There's a lot of things that will be automated, and I think this will give HR an opportunity to kind of make these changes internally to make the organization more successable. And I'm
And as
assuming that there's a lot of HR folks on the call. Is that correct?
yes, they always hear that, and if they don't have the time, they connect because it has been. That's the reason I asked why from your perspective and experience, how it has been like change or transform the way we see this, because we expect to have business partners, and they are not, they we change titles, we change like the name of
Right.
the role or the target to
Hmm.
name it business partners, culture partner, you name it. We can list it on
Right.
Google. We have a lot of new titles
Exactly.
push to push that transformation, and the way we should integrate these topics and these discussions on the table in the organization. But yes, sometimes they said that we had a lot of have a lot of challenge with the leadership because they
Hmm.
expect to have the HR role to manage it
Hmm.
and to guide that, but we need to have like more powerful conversations, and as you said during this discussion, is we need to hear more. And I don't know how much time we are taking to have that pace and hear more about the employees, because as I said in the beginning, from my experience, the employees know more about them, know more, and can define more the culture that they see and they identify in the organization. So is the way that the leadership, how we integrate more or be more influencers in that
Right.
way, and learn more about the programs and the facilitations that you have in the institute and other things, because we need to translate a lot of most of the times we need to translate the value, we need to translate the behaviors, but sometimes we need to have conversation with the leader, very
Right.
simple, because they expect results and we expect to be heard, but at the same time we need to influence. So this is the way we are. That's the reason I ask to you both how you are seeing this. If we are like in evolution or transformation, or we are like in the right way, or we need to do more. Always we need to do more, but are we understanding this? And as you said, Kim, in the pandemic, it was like a reality check to say we all are experiencing the same thing, and it's the moment to talk about it, and you know, the business first, but how we can do things is also important. And we have that challenge. We have challenge to the retention of people, to hire people, to attract people. So how we can attract if we don't know who we are?
Right.
or we
Right.
don't have or we don't have clear who we are.
Well,
And
understanding your own culture is the first step. Understanding what your culture is your first step, and what type of diversity of values exists among your different stakeholders, including your customers, your board of directors back in New York or wherever it might be, and being able to understand your culture itself is extremely important. Is to be able to either make changes in it or manage it properly or whatever. Because, like I said, if you don't manage it, it'll manage you.
Yeah.
And so I think
yes,
that's important. And it's also like with HR people, if you're talking about HR, depending on where you are and what particular country or company or whatever, HR has a variety of perceptions of where it fits and what's important. In some cases, it's on the executive committee and has full discussion and decision making powers. In other cases, it's simply a record keeper, or it may
Right.
be. And so it's important to realize that you need to get the executive committee, the marketing people, the finance people, the accounting people, operations people, all working together and all understanding where you're trying to go. Because just having HR out there pushing may not
Yeah.
get the results you want, because it
That's
may
right.
end up resulting in pushback from the other departments.
yes, yes, it's true. So as I said, I want to put it's not an example, but it's a maybe a reality check. What you expect to have in the organization as a leader: flexibility, openness, some things that obviously are very important behaviors that invite to have open communication, more effective results, you know, invite to have direct and honest feedback, etc. But in the culture, you know, in the country culture, we are not used to be open, to flexible. So
Right.
that's the point that I want to bring you, so you can share insights about it, because we need to understand that sometimes only if you define a value or behaviors, you are going to see that in behaviors very, you know, very fast, or in the at the moment, because culturally in the location or even in our lives, we have not been flexible, and we don't understand what openness is. So sometimes we expect some behaviors that we really doesn't practice in the outside. What are your insight about that, and your impressions or recommendations?
Kim?
So I'm busy typing in the chat. I want to encourage you all to check out the culture change and leadership group on LinkedIn.
Great.
We have the Institute for Culture Change and Leadership on LinkedIn. I'd also feel free to check me out on YouTube and LinkedIn. I have a lot of culture related talks on my YouTube channel, and Jerry's book, Transcultural Competence.
Yes,
You
it's
know,
a great one.
I think it's really important. For people to be plugged in, right? Be plugged into an environment where you are getting ideas, right? Where you can go and ask questions, right? And, how would you solve this dilemma, that I am facing? And, not that you're going to take exactly what someone says, but I find that whenever I'm stuck, if you will, when I go to my peer group and those that support me, around me, I get so many ideas and I get so invigorated that I'm like, oh, I can solve this problem, right? Um, that's one thing that I recommend is being plugged in a place where um, you can get ideas on how to do these things. And the other thing I guess I would say to that is um, Rome, I always tell my kids, Rome wasn't built in a day, but every little step you take towards cleaning your room is a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes,
so,
it's true.
sometimes baby steps, right, are okay as long as they're in the right direction. And you can make positive steps. You don't always have to make them in the next 5 minutes. Sometimes you can take a little time to do it, but as long as you're moving in the right direction, it's always a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize that organizational culture, organizational change, any of these things we've talked about are pretty complex topics. And
Yes.
so, not taking the shortcut solution to a lot of these things and to really try to understand it, and particularly remember who you're talking with may vary, because if you talk to probably 10 consultants, you're going to find 10 different approaches or 10 different sets of values. So, realize that whoever you're dealing with and whoever is helping you or whoever you're dealing with in the organization, they have their own particular perspective. So being able to not jump to conclusions about things, but rather, and don't come in with a set agendas that this is the way the world should be. What you want to do is do it the way the people in the organization want the world to be. So, being able to look at the organizational framework and to see what's there and to understand people and to understand the cultures that are there is extremely critical.
And I like the way you put it, like there's no shortcuts, right? Even
No,
if you try in
no,
these topics,
no.
you cannot think about it. It's not business. There are numbers. We're talking about people. So if you try it, you can fail, and it's hard to fail in these scenarios.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to go in about a minute. So, anything else you
Yes,
want?
we are going to we are just 2 minutes to close. So Jerry, please, can you please, first of all, thanks a lot for your time and for your for bringing your experience and knowledge and expertise. Can you please close? I'm going to ask him also, but you need to go. Uh, can you please close with a impel message, something that can push people to do the best, and with this topic can
Well, just
be
remember
more.
that all of us have learned a culture to operate in, and many times they're very different from the other people we're working with. I remember working in corporations where there might be 6 or 7 people around the executive table, and they would all be coming at the same issues from very different subcultures or different cultures, both nationally and in terms of the functional area they're from and so forth. So it's extremely important to understand all this diversity to be able to get consensus and to get some sort of direction going forward in an organization. Otherwise, those dilemmas turn into conflicts, or misunderstandings, or mistakes, or things that cost the company money or the organization money. So it's important to really understand culture because it has a lot to do with how successful you and your organization are going to be.
Thanks a lot, Jerry. Nice to be with you. Everything, hope everything will be or continue okay.
Okay,
So
well,
hope
thank
to
you very much.
reconnect again. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I
Okay.
got to go
Now
because
I'm going to close with Kim here. You
yeah,
you
good.
you
All right,
did
well, she
great.
will.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
And
Thank you.
I did. I don't know if Jerry gave me his blessing, but I put his email address in the chat.
Yes.
So
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And we shared
and
also
mine
because
as well. Mine
those
as
of
well.
you, are great research, and this discussion has been very powerful. So
Mhm.
I see that you are going to launch our next month book.
Yes.
You
Yes.
can create the positive change at work. We
Yes.
are open to that. It will be on November.
Yes, November 17th is our go live date. I don't know if you can see this little,
Now you
but
can. Wow, that's
that
great.
that's our cover,
Yay.
and it's a rocket that propels the organization to the stars, and it's really meant for, so many books are meant for leaders, and this book is meant for we wrote it in mind of essential and frontline employees. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't apply to leaders, but how can you basically bloom where you're planted, right? How can you create positive change right where you're at right now? Because, a lot of leaders and organizations depend on the departments in their purview to come up with ideas,
Yes.
right? They're always looking
Yes.
for opportunities that they can harness and take it, and run and have it go system wide. And
Mhm.
so, one thing that I really like about the book, and I'm not just trying to plug it, but we have two toolkits. And one toolkit is for frontline employees, and the other one is for managers. So, how can you know, it's good to have tools in your toolkit
That's great.
when you're creating
We
change.
are so
So
happy to hear that
yeah,
we can
yeah,
have tools, and as you said, not only there's a lot of things for leaders, but we need
yes,
some tools so we can have
right,
with us. So we expect that I will touch base with you so we can
yeah,
I can share more
yeah,
information about launch and
yeah.
about launching and also the book. And Kim, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to bring us your experience, your background, everything,
It's our
because you
pleasure.
you you are a great teacher, a great professor, a great education. But when I knew you, I knew that I had mentors there that I can
Oh,
reach out.
thank
So
you.
can you please help me to close this great session with an impel message, not only about culture, but maybe about that thing that is creating positive change at
Well,
work and inside of us.
right. So I just want to say, from Jerry's and my standpoint, we really look at culture and change and leadership, hence the name of the institute, right? Um, in a holistic manner, right? To us, it's not about putting on quick fixes. It's not about putting on band-aids, right? That are going to be good for 5 minutes and fall off. It's really, how can we create change that's going to be positive and build on each other and be generative. And that's, to us, that's just the most important thing. It's not a cookie cutter, right? It's not a cookie cutter that you put down from one organization to the next. And there's a lot of cookie cutters out there, if you will,
Yes.
regarding change projects. For In our book, there's four fuses, as we call them, and the four fuses are: first, to create a positive work environment. The second is to help your employees understand there is an upside to change, right? There is an upside. It's not always a bad thing. Playing to your strengths, right? Not always to be deficit based in your work. And the last one is creating high quality connections with those around you. When you have a relationship with those around you, when you care about the people that you're coming to work with, you are invested at a whole new level. And to me, that's what makes the difference. That's what makes me skip into my university every day.
Wow, that's great.
So
Thanks,
yeah,
Kim. We are more than excited and anxious to have that. Thanks for sharing those four
and it's
practical
so
things. So because we really need to reflect and internalize those to continue make changes positive and
and it's so good
obviously
to see you.
effective.
It's so good to see you again.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon.
All
Gracias a
righty.
todos y que tengan buenas noches. Nos vemos en la próxima Momento de Impulso. Thanks, team. Have a good night. Bye bye.
Bye bye.